Gosh. Okay. I should just start telling my story now, because I don't think this train's ever gonna like stop. But we'll do something about it. Yeah, the train just kept going. I can't believe it. So, alrighty. Well, I just want to say that thank you all so much for following my story at this point. It was a little dark those first couple episodes, just because that is the foundation of my story, of my life, and a lot of that, you know, K-12 experience, and also experiencing sexual abuse, molestation from a close relative was really influential in my life and the way I wanted to express myself in the world. A lot of that really created a lot of I guess sadness in my life, meaning that I didn't know where to go beyond this point, and I didn't know how I wanted to move forward with my life. And you know, I was only 17, 18 thinking about this, but I took a long time to reach this point in my life. And so I'm really gonna talk a little bit about today, you know, what it meant to like get the fuck out, you know, because on the reservation, you kind of grow up in the community, kind of only knowing the community. You only see your elders, you only see people that are in your community, and you kind of like grow up with this sort of attitude toward your community, like this is all I'll ever know. This is kind of like what's here for me. This is all I have. And then also we have very like close family members, and so you know, throughout our community, we have a lot of intergenerational households, meaning you're living with your grandparents, you're living with your aunts and uncles, your cousins, other siblings. And so it can be really, you never really get privacy. And then like, even if you talk about privacy, it's not really honored, because there's no need for privacy oftentimes, unless, you know, there's issues with the gender binary, meaning like women and men have their own societies and they have their own spaces to be in. So it's always interesting to have like separate rules for these two communities within the Navajo people. And I always found myself caught between them. And so I just wanted to really discuss today sort of like what it meant for me to kind of gather my viewpoints, gather where I was at that in my journey at that time. And so I wanted to move forward with talking a little bit about what it meant for me to start, you know, getting my sort of my life ready to take off from the reservation. So when I first decided to leave the Navajo reservation, I would say it kind of happened when I was younger in my years, just because, you know, you always talk about education as an opportunity, a goal to reach. And so when I was growing up, my great-grandmother and other relatives that did pursue higher education were definitely really strong about continuing my education and saying that I should continue to take advantage of all the opportunities that come my way. And so that was sort of the attitude I took toward education. And so that was a big ticket for me to get out of the Navajo reservation, as much as I kind of observed and saw like kind of the disparities and sort of the things that were happening that really needed to be addressed when I was younger growing up. But I didn't have all the answers for that, nor do I have them now. And I probably won't have the answers to any of those in the future either, other than the role that I can play. And right now, the role that I can play is being able to share my story in a way that allows other LGBTQ Native folks, and specifically trans Native folks, the opportunity to find confidence in themselves and find an opportunity to share their story. And what I mean by sharing stories is really being able to showcase their full identity and how they sit in their spaces. And what I mean by spaces is whether that's, you know, your chosen environment. Like for me, I created an environment in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I have, you know, a life partner, someone I married, And I have a beautiful home that I've sort of, gathered things over time and materialistic type of things. And a lot of it are sort of trophies and or they represent a lot of the accomplishments I have along my journey. So that's kind of the stories I want people to share about, is that trans people aren't just suffering, they aren't just being murdered or killed. Our stories aren't here to make people feel bad about us or find pity for us. Our stories are here to be vivid, they're alive, they're ever growing and expanding, and our influence and the breadth of our influence is very vast, meaning that what happens to us tends to create ripples in society. And that's just kind of like where I feel like we have power as trans individuals or LGBTQ people, because we have such important roles in the community. And I didn't know a lot of that when I was younger, but it's definitely something I kept in my forefront when I wanted to leave the Navajo reservation. When I wanted to leave the Navajo reservation, I knew it was going to be through college. And so I originally had planned to attend a state college in Arizona. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to pursue chemistry and maybe go on into becoming a doctor of pharmacology or be a pharmacist in the future. And that didn't really pan out the way I wanted to. I always, I think about my college readiness. I think about the level of rigor that was expected out of me. And I think about, how much discipline I already had to finish college. And I will say that I did the best that I could to show up in high school. I did the best that I could to kind of take advantage of all the offerings I had, at the point where I feel like, I was able to get into the college that I chose to apply to. And I didn't feel too bad about it when I got accepted, but when I got to college, I definitely reflected a lot about the way I exited high school and exited my community. And when I was preparing for college, there's definitely some stories there that they're still hard to think about now, because they're just really simple, trivial things for me to think about. For example, when you're preparing for college, you're often talked to about standardized tests, whether that's the ACT or the SAT, just sort of entrance exams, basically. And so I was definitely from a generation where the No Child Left Behind sort of act or law kind of implemented more standardized testing and teaching how to take tests. And so I would even say by the time I was in middle school, I was just learning how to take tests well. And I wasn't really learning a lot of content other than, my curiosity to read books in the library constantly. And so that was my out for higher education, is that I was always reading, and I always wanted to kind of enjoy the world through literature, stories, or academia, things like that. And so yes, I was basically being brought up to take tests. And one of the things about these tests is that, for my high school, I think it was required that you needed to pass these, the Arizona Instrument Measurement Standards, I believe it's called, the AIMS test. And you had to pass it as a high school student in order to get your diploma. And you had to pass the math, literature, English, writing, and I believe science. So I think those were the four main pillars that they wanted to have all students pass before you were allowed to get your diploma in high school. That was a time when at that time, my class, you had to pass those exams in order for you to get your high school diploma. Obviously, there's a lot of limitations and barriers there, because not everyone is able to perform at those levels. And even myself, I was always constantly worried about not being able to move beyond the Navajo reservation just because of testing standards. And I was always afraid that I wasn't going to be good enough and that I wouldn't do well on these tests. But thankfully, I was able to pass it my first time around my sophomore year. So what happens is you get to choose to retake it to get a better score. And if you have a better score, obviously that translates to higher opportunities or chances for you to enroll in a better school, whether that means going for a top-notch university or going to, an Ivy League or something like that. So it was always like really stressful to think about, standardized tests in that way. But I did survive it. I passed all the different parts of the exam my first time around, my sophomore year. I wasn't really happy about my math score, but at the same time, I was just happy to be done with it and not have to worry about it again. So I knew like my sophomore year that, hey, I passed these exams and I don't have to worry about it no more. And I can just move forward with just taking the classes I needed that I was interested in. And as long as I fulfilled like the university track, which was like, a subset of curricula that allows you to be prepared for higher education. And so that's kind of like one of the ways that I feel like I sort of got myself ready for leaving the Navajo Nation and going on to college. The other one was taking kind of college courses during high school. Like they called it, what was it called? It was college and high school, but like I remember taking most of my math classes and my science classes just to get credits for college. I didn't do well. I think I got like 1 B and 2 C's. So automatically, I think I passed, but going into my first year of college and reflecting on the opportunity to take those classes at the college level was probably more detrimental for me going into my program than it did, at the time being kind of like happy that I got some college credit in high school. One, because your GPA does mean a lot when you're in college and when you want to get involved with these higher performing sort of degrees, especially like that are math heavy, science heavy. And I will say that I definitely wasn't prepared for college as far as that part, that requirement for undergraduate degree. One other thing too was like taking the ACT, and the college that I applied to required the writing exam of the ACT, and so that was an additional fee and more time to take the test. And so I remember I was signing up for the ACT test in Holbrook, Arizona, where it's like about an hour away from my home community in Whitecone. And I had made plans to get a ride to Holbrook with another classmate that was going to be taking the same test with me. And I learned that the morning of that, they decided that they weren't going to be doing the tests and that they didn't let me know right away. And so I just felt really bummed out, and I'm just like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to take this exam that's required of me? And this is my first time I'm taking it. And I just felt really defeated in that moment. And my mom just said, you know what, get out the door, go to the highway and start walking. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to hitchhike to Holbrook just to take this test. And it was really embarrassing for me because like I didn't really, I didn't think that this is what it was going to be like, that in high school I would have to beg relatives and rely on hitchhiking just to go to the local testing site, for college entrance exams. So I took the ACT in Gallup, New Mexico one time. I think it's like an hour and a half away from where I'm from. But I had to pay my aunt to take me there, meaning I had to fill up the gas. I had her bring some kids of hers, and then she's like, I don't really have money for food, so you'll have to pay for food. And I always just remember thinking, like, I'm only 16, 17. I'm already like paying my way forward. Like, this is not fair. But I had to do what I needed to do to prepare myself to leave the Navajo Nation and leaving high school. And so that was one example of how like I pushed myself to get ready for college. And it's funny that I always bring it up, but that was the reality, is that I had to, really find a way to get to testing sites. And the one time that my classmate canceled like early in the morning that they weren't going to be able to make it, and my mom told me, like, go out to the highway, like, get your way over there. I was like less than an hour away from the site, from the testing time start, and like the reservation, like I said, is about an hour away if you plan correctly, you know. And so I remember getting to like Indian Wells Junction where, you know, Bitahochi, the old trading post, was, and I remember being there, and I just thought to myself, like, oh my gosh, like it's already you know, it's already really close to testing time. I don't think I'm gonna be able to make it. Who do I call to cancel? And, you know, I just like, you know, wasting money and stuff like that. And one of my classmates was driving in to the test from Dilcon, and she stopped for me, and I was really embarrassed, you know. One, because like I never imagined myself being picked up on the side of a road hitchhiking to a test, and the other one was, you know, another peer the same age as me, who obviously, I guess, sort of has it well off. They have their own car, they're, you know, have their own job. They seem to have a very supportive family, and it just felt really bad, like that they had to see that side of me. And not to say that I was embarrassed of who I was or where I was coming from. It was just really, for me, embarrassing because I didn't want to be seen that way. I didn't want to like have to rely on others to, you know, step forward or have my gains in my life. And I remember that was really embarrassing. And I got to the testing on time, thankfully, for my classmate. But I remember we had like a break in the middle of the test. And my good friend Tiffany came up to me. She's like, "Oh my gosh, how did you get here? Like, I heard like so and so brought you in." And I was like, "Yeah, of course, that's what happened." And you know, it's just embarrassing. And I remember sharing that with Tiffany, and she's like, "You could have just called or let me know." And I'm like, "Well, when you live in their dorm, and so I don't know how that works. You know, when you don't live in the dorms during the week." And I didn't know your contact information, and it was a strange interaction. I know that. And that was like, I think one or at least the second time I took the test. So I didn't do so well on the test. I like I said, I didn't really like standardized tests. Is just so stressful, and I always was more worried about kind of the strategy of how I take tests. And for me, it was really tough for me to take tests because I was constantly distracted, sort of by the number of items in the exam. You know, really focused about trying to get through every question at the end of the day, trying to make sure I fill out the bubbles just correctly, so like the machine doesn't read my answers incorrectly, and just very particular and meticulous about the way I wanted to complete each question. And I know they always say, like, you know, the best way to do this is like, you know, if you can't answer something, just stop there and move on to the next one. But I hated doing that. I hated like a failure. I hated being, you know, like I felt like a failure at that moment because I just couldn't answer a question. I felt like I didn't have the training. I felt like I wasn't ready for college, you know, just because of this one question. And it was really gave me a lot of anxiety, very anxiety inducing. And I always, you know, it was just how it was. And, you know, I took the ACT 3 times, like I said. The first time I got like a 20, the second time I got like an 18, the third time I got like a 19. And I was like, well, I averaged a 19 and that's as best it's gonna get. I don't care about taking another test because I'm just gonna apply for one school and that's it, you know? And so that was kind of like my strategy, and I did that. And so, you know, I think some of the things that I learned early in my high school years was sort of vision casting, or like kind of like sharing like how you envision your life to be. And so in high school, like my senior year, I started to really talk about like where I want to be and what exactly I want to do, and kind of getting people behind me as far as understanding like my goals and my ambitions of like where I want to live, how I want to live my life, what kind of career I wanted, and how I was going to get there. And so I was just really that person that was really wanting to share with everyone that I want to get the hell out of the Navajo reservation. I want to get out of Arizona, and I want to just get away from all the yuckiness that I had to live with. So that's kind of how I sort of prepared high school. I also, I was a part of some summer programs. One of them specifically was in Southern Arizona at the University of Arizona for juniors, and I met like 50 other youth my age there, and they came from all over Arizona, and the goal was to bring minorities onto campus to kind of teach us what it was like to prepare for writing courses at a college level. And because I guess they recognize like that's where pitfalls are for minority students in college, is that we don't all have like a really good approach to writing or literature, and I think basic things like math and chemistry. And so that summer was filled with that. So it was like 6 weeks that we got to live on the southern part of the campus where all the new residential halls were. And that's kind of like where I first got to meet other non-native, non-Navajo people, and it was really hard for me to sort of absorb a lot of that too. And it was just a short amount of time, but I gravitated very heavily toward the women that were in the program. And I know there were some instances where they were like, I think you're gay, or I think you don't like women, stuff like that. But at the time I didn't really want to entertain that because I had already kind of created a story that I wanted to stick with, and I didn't have time to kind of open that up for interpretation or explore that, especially when I was young. And I knew I couldn't really do that when I was in high school, because I had already tried so hard not to be like the main person to be picked on because of sexual orientation or expression. And I just remember thinking too, like, oh my God, it would be so nice to like go home and be supported, but I knew I couldn't find that too. And so I do want to be very frank that there were people in my lives, people I grew up with, that I was eventually, understanding of where they are, as far as like telling me like, I'll always love you for who you are. I don't care how you act. I don't care how you behave. You are my good friend, things like that. And I really want to say that I believe them wholeheartedly and genuinely, that they were really trying to be there as best as they could. And they didn't quite know how to do that just yet, especially when I didn't really quite understand my own status, as far as being, out and proud and ready to be queer, gay, or anything like that. And so it was really, I just want to say like thank you to those that were there for me in that way, and that I recognize that definitely a lot. When I reflect on those years as I was preparing to leave high school. And one of the other experiences I had too was just the application process, applying to the University of Minnesota, because I didn't do the online application. I asked for like a physical booklet that they sent my way, like a whole admission packet. So I did that route, and I had my counselor help me kind of identify like the financial aid needs I was definitely needing to look into. And so I remember Mr. McNamee was like, Donavan, let's not beat around the bush. You're poor. You come from a region that has like really poor people in it. You also come from a community and a nation that has really poor people. So let's not beat around the bush and just say that, you definitely fall under the line of poverty. And that for me was the very first time that someone just like outright said, you're poor, you come from an impoverished background. And that was sort of an identity and an assignment to me that I really didn't feel good about, because all of a sudden it's just this white man is telling me that I'm a poor Native person and that I need to capitalize on those identities to get better or get further in life. And for me, I felt that was really like shitty, that you had to use those identities as sort of like ways to gain access to higher education institutions, way to gain access to scholarships and grants and stipends that will really help you pay for your education without paying, taking out student loans and stuff like that. So that was a really tough time for me to really kind of like understand that identity when I was leaving my senior year. And I will say, I will talk about my college years too, is that my mother was really upset with me that I was constantly, labeling us as poor, because she really always felt that she did the best she could, that she could provide the best way she can. And I really believe that she did her best. And at the same time, I also felt like, going to college and preparing to leave for college when I was in high school, that, kind of being told that you're poor, you come from this sort of background, that you kind of step out of that, I would say, I kind of had to step out of my pathway a little bit to kind of observe what they were saying about me, what sort of identity I was now kind of like gonna hold and like have entering college. Because I didn't really want to enter college thinking like, oh, I'm a poor kid, I'm a brown kid, I know nothing about the outside world, and I'm just now entering this college institution. So that was a really strange time for me too, during my senior years, being told that like sort of economic status identity that I had too. And I will say that preparing, my family for the news that I was going to leave the reservation was really interesting, because I didn't tell them anything. I just kind of gave them the idea that I might be going to a local college like NPC, Northland Pioneer College, or U of A, Arizona, University of Arizona. I gave them this illusion that that's where I was going to go, that I wasn't going to go that much farther. And it wasn't until March of like 2006 this letter came. And my mom was like, what is this? And I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, you got a letter from the University of Minnesota. And all I kept thinking to myself is like, did you open it? Like, did you open my mail? And so I sat down on the couch with her and my grandma, and I opened this letter up, and it said, congratulations, Donavan. You have joined the class of 2010 at the University of Minnesota. You've been admitted into, the College of Biological Sciences and all this other stuff. And then it said, like, you will get more information about, how to register for Nature of Life, which is sort of a small seminar, colloquium for the first year students in the college that I was admitted into, and had more information about scheduling, your campus orientation and everything like that. And those were all offered in the summer. Thankfully, I had options to not have to do that, because like that's another thing that really stressed me out too when I was in high school preparing to leave, was like money. Money was a huge thing. And I remember like researching plane tickets and getting things like that ready. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy to convince family members or convince people to give you money for anything. And I was always like, never really wanted to ask people for help in that way, like financial help. It was always strange for me to want to lean in on family when it came to financial aid or any sort of assistance, because I always knew that if that was the case, that they'll kind of bring it up later on and just sort of kind of make you feel crappy about that. So I didn't want to borrow money from family, and so I really took it upon myself to like get ready and save up as much as I can. And I bought my plane ticket to college. It was a one-way ticket, red-eye flight. It was like leaving at 7 a.m., arriving at like almost 1 o'clock in the morning. And so that was like how I prepared to leave, was I bought the plane ticket, and everything else sort of just like was planned around that departure time. And so I had signed up for orientation. So I had the flight ordered to go out on a Thursday, and then I had orientation that same morning. That Friday morning was when my orientation was supposed to take place. Supposed to be a full day thing. And I'll tell you that story about when I first went to college in the next episode. But that was kind of another bump in the road for me, was just trying to find financial aid, trying to find ways to pay for those sort of requirements prior to going to college. And I didn't think about those things. I didn't think about travel costs. I didn't think about getting new clothes, getting luggage to go to college. Luckily, during my senior graduation dinner with my family, they were able to supply me with a lot of that stuff too, which was I'm really grateful for. I got a luggage set, and I got some toiletry, travel bags, things like that. And I also just really wanted to let people know, my family and my community, that I was proud of where I was coming from, and that I was really excited to head off to Minnesota and start my journey there. And I think a lot of them were pretty happy about my decision to leave the Navajo Reservation, and that I had these real goals to, get my degree and come home one day to help. And I will say that it still continues to bug me that I haven't fulfilled, some of the things that I promised when I was in high school. And they may never be fulfilled, but at least I know that there were moments in my future journey where I did try to re-enter community, where I did try to move home or be closer to home, that just didn't quite work out. And so when I was preparing to leave, I feel like all these new kind of identity crises came up, and also being prepared, whether that was financially, mentally, spiritually, physically prepared to leave home, was really tough for me, because all of a sudden I was doing a lot of reflection on, am I prepared enough? Did I do a good job at getting myself ready to leave? Were there any disadvantages or limitations in the education that I received? And will I do well in my future college? Will I do well, getting along interpersonally with other people? Will I be scared of other people getting to know who I am? Those were a lot of my concerns that I had before leaving college, leaving for college. So I think that's something that all high school students possibly experience. But I think for me, even working in higher education, as far as admissions go, reflecting back on my experience, I will say that it's a really typical experience for any Native American student, just because of locality and where we're coming from, sort of the cultural understanding of getting ready for education or higher education. A lot of this sort of obligation or expectation to continue to still help your family or still stay connected with your home as far as cultural and traditional practices. There's still all that connection there, and there's no real disconnection with how and where you'll show up to do that for your family. And so I think that was something that I didn't realize I would have to go through. And then, later on in my early years of college, getting a job where I was understanding that experience of, incoming freshman students or prospective students. And so that's kind of that's kind of how I prepared to leave for college. And some of the weird, microaggressions or things that I had to face as I was preparing to leave too. So I think there are stories, maybe even the way I shared my story to a lot of people is that my journey was so, clean cut, straight to the point. No, there wasn't a lot of that. There was a lot of convincing and a lot of trying to, make my family understand why I made the choice that I made to leave home. And even today, I continue to have to justify why I still live in Minnesota and why I don't want to be around my family. And a lot of it has to do with just finally living my truth, finally living as the person I am meant to be, and the ways in which I hope to return home or even give back in some small way. I hope, I'll have the answers for that soon. And that's something that I think that I'm really, trying to understand my accountability level for, is making sure that I do return home one day, and maybe it might be temporary, maybe it might be permanent, but I do still, have a strong connection to where I do want to make some changes. I do want to impact my home community so that young people are feeling supported, they're feeling seen, and that when it comes to helping, you know, my tribe, my home community understand like sort of what it means to help launch your student off to go to college, it would be so nice to know that, you know, someone came home and intentionally helped our communities and our nation to prepare for that transition, from whether that's emerging into adult or whether that's just going from a collectivistic community to an individualized world where now a student has to navigate a higher ed institution or a campus as an individual and not as a group or a community of people. So that's definitely something that I really want to be able to impact in the future, and because that definitely impacted the way I prepared to leave for college and leave the Navajo reservation. Thank you. Yeah.